There you can see the human cost of the conflicts. We want to now take a closer look at the humanitarian efforts in those hotspots and how governments and agencies go about helping people. Curt Welling is a senior fellow at Dartmouth's Tuck School of Business. He's also a former president and CEO of AmeriCares. That's a massive nonprofit disaster relief organization. Now, welcome to the show. It's good to see you. Curt, let me start with this. Who should or who's best prepared to help with this humanitarian effort or aid?
Well, it's hearing about and seeing those images is always deeply disturbing because they all focus on unspeakable human suffering. I think for purposes of this discussion, we have to distinguish two things. One is emergencies which are the result of some unforeseen natural disaster, such as the tsunami in Japan or the earthquake in Haiti, and disasters which are essentially man-made disasters where they're the consequence of some aspect of man's inhumanity to man, whether that's a war or a persecution. The nature of the response is quite significantly different, whether one is talking about the former or the latter.
Let's focus on humanitarian aid, and let's take Iraq as an example. We're seeing some of the pictures now from where Sean is there in Iraq helping us cover the story. And you think about, a lot of people see it and they go, I want to help. But what they don't realize is that there's a huge political apparatus you have to get through first before the aid probably actually gets to the people. Help us better understand that.
Yeah, there are several levels of complexity in political man-made natural disasters, such as we're seeing in Iraq, or I think your piece mentioned the displacement of people in South Sudan or Darfur. The first of which, of course, is it's an active war zone. So one of the primary considerations is whether or not you're putting responders in harm's way, and it's an enormous impediment to mobilizing a large-scale humanitarian effort because of simply the risk of putting people in danger. The second thing is that these situations, because they're in military context or quasi-military context, are often logistically incredibly complicated. And relief missions of this order of magnitude are complicated enough when there's no military complication, but they're geometrically more difficult under those circumstances. And then finally, you have this very crazy network of political considerations that have to be negotiated. So all I can tell you is that what you have is an outpouring of emotional response and compassion when one sees images like this, but the ability to get aid in a timely way to the people that are directly affected is very, very difficult.
You were the CEO of AmeriCare, so you know this better than anybody. Walk us through what a day was like. There's a crisis happening out there. I'm sure your staff comes to you and say, hey, we've got this breaking event. We need to do something. What are the questions that you ask, and how do you decide who gets what?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Well, again, I want to distinguish a little bit between man-made disasters and natural disasters, but let's assume we're talking about a refugee crisis or an endangered population because of some political action or war. In organizations like AmeriCares, response and the desire and willingness to respond is sort of in the DNA. So they're mobilized all the time looking for ways to get assistance to the point of the spear or the point of greatest impact. So you're always looking at preparedness. You're looking at the logistical complexities. The situation in the Middle East is relatively slow to galvanize world opinion, but it's been something that's been on humanitarian screens for some time as a result of the Syria conflict. So there are a lot of people who are thinking about how do we mobilize either money or material and people to assist with the people who are either refugees from the Syrian civil war or now this conflict with ISIS. An awful lot of what determines your ability to respond is your relationships with organizations that allow you to project into the theater of operations. So in this case, that could be local military, it could be a supranational agency like the Red Cross, or it could be your own private network. And then, of course, your ability to respond depends on resources. Do you have the stuff that's required? And do you have the money to be able to get it there? And that's where ultimately all these things come down to a question of resources. Is there the will and ability, and then are there the resources to get things into the theater in a timely way?
Curt, For those watching out there, I mean, this isn't the first disaster or first humanitarian crisis we've seen. And a lot of times people will probably think, if not ask, and want to take action, which means giving money to an organization. And there's always skepticism that if I give you $1, how do I know that $1 is given to that specific cause? So if you want to give money to an organization, first of all, where do you go to do that? And second, how do you know that they're going to be held accountable, that the money actually goes to the people? And I guess very quickly is, how do I know that the money actually got to the people that I wanted to give to help?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one that those involved in this field spend a lot of time wrestling with. So the first thing is, you can find expertise lists of people that are working in a particular area by going to a common media outlet. I'm sure your network actually probably does the same thing, where it compiles a list of people that are working in a particular crisis. You then have to do a little bit of homework. You have to find out whether or not the organization has a track record, has expertise, what they say about accountability, and what they say about how money actually gets to the field, because you're absolutely right. There are organizations that do a very good job of getting that money to the field, and there are organizations that do a less good job. So it's a combination of doing a little bit of homework and going to expert sources that will give you a list of the people that are working in a particular area.
Curt Welling, Dartmouth Senior Fellow at the School of Business there. Great to have you on the show. We'll